Hello and welcome to my channel Polyglot Reading. My name is David and today this video is the first part of my library tour. Let's start with the shelf right here in the middle. I will not present all books but just pick a few ones that are important to me. But if you see some specific volume or author that you are interested in, just let me know in the comments and I would be happy to make a special video about it. So this is my collection of editions from the Franklin Library, United States publisher, who made very bibliophilic editions, mostly of authors of British authors and American authors, usually illustrated, often with the illustrations from the original editions, very nicely bound in half leather, all leather, edges gilt, and a ribbon. Very precious volumes, but accessible at a reasonable price also on the second-hand book market. And the two volumes that are very special to me is this edition of Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray and this collection of stories by Edgar Allan Poe, The Tales of Mystery and Imagination, also very nicely illustrated. And these books are important to me because these were actually the first books that I read in their English original, apart from some short stories we read at school. So this book will always be very special to me. This is a collection of Italian classics from an Italian publisher, Mondadori. It's a collection similar to the Library of America. So it's a sort of a reference edition printed on India paper. So they're usually 1,000 or more pages to each volume, and containing the most relevant works of the author. And also usually they are annotated, very detailed, so very helpful. I have a couple of volumes from this series, most of them Italian originals, this Italian author Calvino, or next to it this volume of Grazia Deledda, which was a famous Italian writer from Sardinia. She was also awarded the Nobel Prize, but almost forgotten today. There's only one translation into Italian from another language. This is Italian version of Thomas Mann's German novel, The Magic Mountain, and which I'm using for my long-term reading project of this novel on my channel. Okay, here at the right-hand side, nicely bound in half leather, the complete works of a German author, Karl Lebrecht Immermann. This is an edition from around the year 1900, and these books are a nice example that buying second-hand books is also very interesting, because sometimes you find stories in there from the previous owners. So this ex libris indicates that this book was owned by Dr. Anton von Riepel, who was a famous engineer. The bridge that you can see in the background is the bridge he constructed. It is still the tallest railway bridge in Germany, not taller, the tallest, highest one in terms of absolute altitude, but in terms of distance from the valley. And yeah, that's interesting to follow up on these little stories from previous owners. The author, Karl Immermann, is almost forgotten today, but I think still worth the read. Okay, this is the complete German edition of the Russian-American author Vladimir Nabokov. At the time when I started to read Nabokov, it was in my very early 20s, where I was not able to read his works in the English originals, so I decided to buy this nice German edition, very nicely made also from the technical point of view, this nice dark red and the silver embossings. And a special feature is this butterfly. There's a story behind that, because Nabokov was also an almost professional entomologist who specialized in butterflies, and he actually discovered and described scientifically a couple of new species of butterflies, and another couple of species that were discovered later were named after him. And so this is an homage to this other aspect of Nabokov's work. And here on the top shelf, there's the complete works of Georg Christoph Lichtenberg, a German author from the early 19th century. He actually was a professor of physics, but he was also a very well-read man, many literary interests, and he's famous, at least in Germany, for his aphorisms, very witty and sometimes caustic ones. For example, if someone's head clashes with a book and there's a hollow sound, it's usually not the fault of the book. And this is a complete edition of another German author of the 19th century, Adalbert Stifter. I don't know whether he's known in the English-speaking world. He was very famous. I love his short stories, but his novels to me are a bit tedious and very lengthy, so I really have difficulties with his longer novels. So maybe, but I think my latest reading impression is already about 20 years ago, so maybe I should give him another try one of these days. Okay, and on the right-hand side, another German author, but who was also internationally known at his times, Paul Heyse. He was also awarded the Nobel Prize of Literature. This is a novel, In Paradise. I love best his short stories and his novellas. He was very famous for them. And he was also crucial for making Italian authors known in Germany, because he was he was among the first ones who translated many Italian authors of the 19th century into German. And I love him very much, but he was very famous at his time. But in his later age, he was very severely attacked by the naturalists, who considered him as an example of a very backward-oriented and old-fashioned writer. And due to these attacks, he was quickly forgotten after his death. Okay, moving downwards, these are editions from the UK publisher Folio Society, also known for its precious bibliophilic editions. These are 2 volumes from Terry Pratchett. I think he is very famous for his novels located in the disc world. And these are very nicely made, with illustrations also on the cover, and richly illustrated. I think I don't need to tell much about Terry Pratchett and his very comical and very funny and witty books. I think they are very famous and very well known. Moving down a bit, okay, these are my some CDs. Usually, I think most of my compact discs I've already digitalized, but this is a collection from my favorite classics label, CPO. Like in literature, also in classical music, I like to listen to the more forgotten composers, and the CPO takes care of them. And there's also a literature connection here. One of my favorite German authors from the Romantic area, E.T.A. Hoffmann, was sort of a multi-talent. He was also a painter and a composer, and CPO issued recordings of his works, of his symphonic works, and very, very beautiful, at least for those who love classical music as I do. And here begins a collection which is probably more interesting for the German subscribers. This is a collection from the publisher 2001, 2001, this is called in Germany. They are publishing the favorite books of a German author called Arno Schmidt, who was a very creative and interesting writer. And he also was very active in rediscovering forgotten German writers from the 19th century. And this publisher, 2001, took care of republishing these almost forgotten works. And to me, for my taste, this is really a mixed bag. Some of them I consider third class, like the first volume I picked out of the shelf. Other ones I really love. For example, this German author, Wetzel. I really love him. I don't like best the actual novel Belphegor. That is the one that was highly praised by Arno Schmidt, and it was published in this series. He wrote a couple of other novels that I like more. but nevertheless, also Belphegor is well worth a read. Moving on, still again more volumes from this series, now in a lighter binding, a German author, Karl Ferdinand Gutzko, a thick 3 volumes novel, which is really a panorama of the German society in the 19th century across all social classes, and with a very captivating story. Another important book from the point of literary history is this edition of the novel Die Island Felsenburg by the author Schnabel, published in the beginning of the 18th century. And at that time, it was the custom to have very long and winding titles of novels. So this complete page is just the title of this novel. It's almost like an abstract or the summary of the whole novel. And this novel is particularly important for the German literary history, because many writers, many authors of the 19th century that later became famous, reported that this was their preferred reading in their youth time or young adulthood. So it had a high influence, impact on the German literature in the 19th century. This is more some literature for a project that I'm currently planning. There's a German Jewish writer, Moshe Yaakov ben-Gavriel, who is almost forgotten, and I was trying to get through his novels and make a special video about it. I think only a few of them were ever translated. And this is, I'm not a specific fan of Harry Potter, so this is more the language learning department, because it's I like to read it in the languages I'm learning, in the French edition and the Yiddish edition of the first volume. That's easy because then you know the plot, and then it's easier to understand it in a foreign language. And this is a collection of Italian paperbacks from the period where I was starting to learn Italian, so I preferred paperbacks because then without hesitation I could take a lot of notes and scribble and write in the volumes. It's a very broad collection of different works. Leonardo Sciascia was among the first one who pointed out in his works the criminal activities of the mafia in Sicily. Other more recent works, like the novel by Susanna Tamaro, I don't know the English title, it should be something like Go Wherever Your Heart is Taking You, a crime novel by Andrea Camilleri, and an adventure novel by an author who was very famous in the 19th century, wrote a lot of adventure books for young adults, but these novels were also read by adults, and there are a couple of film adaptations in the 1970s. And this is a very humoristic Italian author, and I think Elsa Morante is also known internationally. She is one of the great ladies of the 20th century Italian literature, and also known internationally as Primo Levi, with his 2 novels that report on how he survived the concentration camp at Auschwitz, and the second one, La Tregua, reports his peregrinations after the liberation, where he was transported all across Europe and Siberia until he finally was able to return to Italy. A special section with a couple of novels from a Yiddish author, Israel Jacob Singer, the brother of the Nobel Prize winner Isaac Bashevis Singer, and these are special to me because I first learned about this author by means of the Italian translation of his works. A couple of them are in the shelf, and I fell in love with Yiddish literature, and that was what made me start to learn Yiddish as another foreign language. And finally, there are a few books of another writer I only learned through the Italian translation. Zoran Zivkovic, an author from Serbia, is a professor of literature and works very interesting crime novels using postmodern narrative structures and approaches to write very original and funny and entertaining crime novels. And okay, let's take a look at the back here. There's at least one volume that I would like to show here, and this is a complete collection of the stories and tales by Roald Dahl, an author I love very much due to his very special, sometimes dark and macabre humor. And yeah, it's a very nice complete volume of all his shorter works, short stories and other shorter narrative works. Yeah, okay, what else is back there of interest to the English reader? Yeah, this volume of D.H. Lawrence. It's a real brick, very thick volume, a sort of a doorstopper, and it contains, I think, most of his novels. Not all of them, but most of them. Yeah, okay, and that's already it. We are already at the end of this first library tour or shelf tour. Let me know whether you enjoyed it or whether you've seen some volumes that you would like to have a special video on. Take care, see you next time, and bye-bye.